You might be surprised to learn that treadmill-like devices were first used by the Romans to lift heavy objects, and then they were modified in Victorian England as a punishment for prisoners who had to spend hours a day on them. I discovered this in Professor Daniel Lieberman's book, Exercise. He defines exercise as, quote, discretionary, voluntary physical activity for the sake of health and fitness. And he says until recently, no one did that.
This morning I went for a run in the disgusting summer heat, right? Nobody would have done that a few generations ago. What a completely stupid thing to do, right? To waste energy doing this uncomfortable thing because people had to be physically active.
Here's probably my favorite line in his book. Opinions differ on whether treadmills are still used for punishment. Well, he's not wrong about that. Health is Wealth is supported by Meridian Health Services and LifeStream Services.
Or imagine explaining to your great-great-grandparents that you went to a store, spent a lot of money on heavy things whose sole purpose was to be lifted. They would think we're mad, and we're not mad because those things actually are helpful, but they're only helpful in this modern, strange context of a world in which physical activity has become utterly discretionary.
A huge part of Daniel's research in the Department of Human Evolutionary Biology at Harvard involves traveling around the world studying people who live today like our ancestors did before the Industrial Revolution. These are hunter-gatherer tribes, where the men hunt wild animals and the women gather roots and berries, or subsistence farmers who grow all their own food without machinery.
Most of them don't have electricity or running water. They work very hard and they eat a very non-industrial, non-Western diet. And for example, I just came back from a month in Rwanda, where we were in the north of Rwanda, in a very rural area. But a lot of these countries, people are moving rapidly to cities, and they're adopting industrial lifestyles.
So these people living pre-industrial lifestyles are rapidly disappearing, but they're vital for researchers like Daniel because they help us learn what life was like for our ancestors. For millennia, just about every single human on the planet lived like this. And then about 250 years ago, the steam engine ushered in the Industrial Revolution, and machines and factories began to completely change the way people lived. 250 years seems like a long time, but in the scale of human existence, 250 years is tiny. Before that, people had to work very hard physically to get enough food to eat. Average hunter-gatherer men walk about 9 miles a day to hunt, and hunter-gatherer women walk about 6 miles a day to collect roots and berries. By contrast, the average American today walks 1.7 miles a day. That's a huge difference. But here's a key thing to remember. Our ancestors walked all those miles every day by necessity to get food and water to survive. Today, almost all our walking is still by necessity, but now that looks more like walking from the living room to the refrigerator.
It is easy for me to stay in my house. I don't even have to leave the house to do any banking or go to the grocery store or do anything. It can all be delivered. Many of us are working from our homes. Many people don't have to leave their bed in order to do things day to day. So while this has been convenient for many reasons, it also has taken physical activity out of the daily equation for a lot of people.
Last year, 30% of American jobs were classified as sedentary, and another 34% require light physical work. Combined, that's about 64% of the American workforce that has jobs with little to no physical demand. Add to that all the daily conveniences Paul mentioned. We have essentially infinite entertainment options available to us at the tap of a remote. We don't grow our own food. In fact, our meals are often delivered to us. And when we do leave home, we're not using physical exertion to get places. We drive everywhere, even though more than a quarter of our daily trips are less than a mile. So there's a snapshot of our modern life. A buffet of entertainment to sit and enjoy, meals prepared for us and delivered to us, and transportation that requires no physical exertion. If we think about societies before the Industrial Revolution, that modern lifestyle sounds strikingly similar to the very pinnacle of society, the royalty and the very wealthiest elites. Instead of Netflix and YouTube, monarchs had court jesters and their own musicians to entertain them. Instead of Grubhub, the wealthy landowners had serfs to work their land and servants to cook for them. And instead of automobiles, royalty and elites throughout the world were carried by servants in litters. In fact, one of the most popular sports in 19th century Britain was called pedestrianism. Basically, it was competitive walking. Wealthy people rode around in their own carriages, but they'd have footmen following them on foot. So these aristocrats began to bet each other on whose footmen could walk the farthest or the fastest. Sitting on your butt watching other people participate in athletic competitions and then placing bets on those competitions? Yeah, that sounds familiar too. So the conveniences of modern life have brought us to a point where Americans are so sedentary, we're living like kings and queens, and not always in a good way. Because so many of us don't have to be physically active, we turn to exercise to stay healthy. Again, Daniel Lieberman defines exercise as discretionary, voluntary physical activity for the sake of health and fitness. Many forms of exercise, like walking, are free, and we'll talk more about that in a couple of weeks. But exercise has become a big business. The U.S. fitness and gym industry brought in an estimated $45 billion in revenue last year. The market for athletic clothing is an estimated $26 billion. Meanwhile, here in East Central Indiana, 42% of households are either below the poverty line or they're above the poverty line but struggle to pay for basic needs. And it's not just money. Time is a big barrier to exercise for many people. With a job and a young family, I can relate to that very much.
People are stressed. Many people have, get up early in the morning, have long commutes, have a hard time getting to work. They don't have the time. They're too stressed. They don't live in environments where there are sidewalks and other sort of facilities to help them be physically active. So the result is that people who have wealth and privilege and time on their hands are the ones who have more options to go to the gym, have a treadmill in their basement, have time to run, train for marathons, swim the English Channel, whatever it is they like to do. And so we've had this very strange inversion.
An inversion. Until a few hundred years ago, almost everyone had to live a physically active lifestyle, unless you had the wealth and privilege to choose a sedentary lifestyle. Now it's flipped. Life in modern America usually requires very little physical activity, but those with wealth and privilege have time and money to choose exercise, maybe joining a golf or tennis club or buying a Peloton bike. Buying a stationary bike and then a monthly membership fee to join a virtual cycling class? That wouldn't make any sense to our great-grandparents. But that's the privilege of exercise in modern America. Hey, we've got more episodes of Health is Wealth coming, so make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Next time, we'll visit with corn-fed roller derby to find out how joining a team can motivate you to stay active. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.